Hello, everybody. We're getting near the end. Chapters 33 and 34, a continuation of Division 5 cultural context. Chapter 33, muted group theory. I've always enjoyed this one as well as Standpoint. It made sense in a lot of ways. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt you couldn't express your opinion because the majority felt differently? That is the idea behind muted group. Marginalized groups are often not heard because the dominant group does not allow them to talk or it negates their voice. I've never been a college football fan. I know that's going to be a shock to most of you, but never me. You know, I like baseball, and in the beginning of the end of the baseball season, beginning of the football season, uh, I try to talk baseball, and everybody wants to talk football, and I feel muted. It's like no sense of me saying anything. I went to I'm legally blind. I went to a blind conference, and somebody said, "Well, you can see." I said, "Yeah, yeah, I can see a little bit. I have tunnel vision." When you're not blind, excuse me. According to the doctors, I'm still blind. I'm legally blind, but I found out then that I was too blind to be sighted and too sighted to be blind. So a lot of times when I tried to talk for the blinded community, I was basically told that I didn't know what I was talking about because I wasn't blind enough. So a muted group is people belonging to low power groups who must change their language when communicating publicly. And the textbook focuses on the difference between men and women. And I really don't like those generalizations, but that's where the focus of this is. And it does make sense. You know, Anthropologists will study a culture, or an ethnographer will go into a culture and they'll talk to the people who's going to talk, and that's usually the men. And they don't get the women's side of it. So if you are not in a dominant group, then your voice often is not heard unless you change the way you talk. And now you are using a different language in many aspects to communicate. Men are the gatekeepers in most media. Most, especially mainstream media, the men are the ones that make the decision on what stories we're going to run, what pictures we're going to put up, how we're going to do this, how we say that. Mainstream expression is the traditional media controlled by men. They use terms that men are used to, and they've become part of our lexicon, like a level playing field based on competition, which is something men is more male centric than female centric. Speaking women's truth, uh, women often have to change the style and talk in a man's style, male style, to get their point across. And then oftentimes when they do, because of the biases out there, I mean, I may have mentioned this before. If I haven't, I'll say it now, but if I have, I apologize. But a female boss that's assertive is more often called a bitch than a leader, whereas a man that's assertive would often be called a leader. Speaking out in private, women in many cases are bilingual. They will, when they are together, they can talk the way they want to and get their point across. But, and that's in private. But if they go into public, then they have to change their lexicon and start speaking in a male centered voice to get their point across. The book has a section of the feminist dictionary, and I found it interesting. A cuckold is a man that's his wife is cheating on him. But if the opposite is true, they don't have a name for the female that's being cheated on. She's just called a wife. Herstory, I told you about that, I believe, in the last video. You know, if history is recorded by the people in power, by the winners, you know. World War II's history is basically written by U.S., England, France, and Russia because they won. So, and women voice has not been heard over the history of mankind because men were dominant. Men could write, women couldn't write back in the day. So their stories didn't get told. And I like the definition of feminist. Any opinion that does not make me look like a doormat. So a woman is a feminist, you know, if she has an opinion, according to this dictionary. Now, is it biased? Of course it's biased. But it's nice to look at and compare the difference. Sexual harassment, an unwanted imposition of sexual requirements. So and that's a word that basically women created. The feminist movement created sexual harassment and mansplaining. But I had a female instructor one time talking about harassment, and she said, and just for your knowledge, guys, it is not 2 words. Harass anyway. It is not 2 words. And it's something that a guy, I wouldn't have thought of that. Most guys I know of wouldn't have thought of that to explain it like that. But many guys I know, when and especially the childish ones, harass. Do you get that, harass? So yeah, harass somebody is a single word. Men as the oppressors and women as the oppressed. The text talks about that a lot, and many people don't necessarily look at it that way because in most cases it was not intentional. It's how society developed. Let me rephrase that. It was intentional because men want to stay in power, but it's not as clear as many people think. Because, as I said, I was in a muted group when I was the sighted person in the blind community, or semi-sighted. I was in the marginalized group when I want to talk about baseball and everybody else wants to talk about football. And so a man can be in a marginalized part from the males around him, and oftentimes female. My daughter-in-laws love college football. I'm just not into it. So, and then you have to look at it from, that many men are marginalized. Many women are in superior positions. But overall, it's the male dominant society. But then you also have to deal with different ethnic groups. And the thing about it is the muted group basically has to be bilingual. They have to understand the rules of the dominant group, and they have to understand the rules of the marginalized group. Whereas people in a dominant group don't have to understand the rules in a marginalized group. So it's not perfectly clear, but it's a great theory to look at in depth, find out what's going on, see how especially if you're doing ethnography work, if you're doing ethnography work and you are in the organization, you want to look at all parts of the organization, not just the dominant part that's doing most of the speaking. The second part of this section 5 is intercultural communication. And culture is socially constructed, historically transmitted patterns of symbols, meanings, premises, and rules. I've mentioned a couple of times my perspective on culture. The beginning of this book uses a comparison of the United States versus Japan. One thing that I didn't like was it said America. Well, technically, Canadians are Americans. Technically, Brazilians are Americans, North Americans and South Americans. But we're United States citizens. It's something I think they should make more clear. But generally, if you say American, people think in U.S. So the U.S. versus Japan. Power distance. Less powerful people accept that power is distributed unequally. You know, if you aren't the person in power and you don't like it, then you're going to have to accept that power is not distributed equally. In the U.S., it's low. In Japan, it's medium. And then masculinity, clearly defined gender roles. U.S. high, Japan extremely high. I live out in Marion County, Georgia, and they had a Latin man. I don't know what country he was from, South American somewhere, of Latin descent. And he basically caught his wife and another man in a compromising position and killed them both. This was 10, 15 years ago. And he escaped from jail. And then the community basically hit him and got him back out of the U.S. to his country because culturally, he did what he was supposed to do because he was a man. But that's not the culture we have, so to speak. So in that case, the masculinity was extremely high, like it is in Japan. You know, the senior man, he's the one that makes the decisions. The women are subservient. Uncertainty avoidance. People feel threatened by ambiguity. And in the US, it's high. In Japan, it's extremely high. But oftentimes, people flock toward ambiguity. Think about when before your time, but when Ronald Reagan was running for president, he said, "Are you better off now than you were?" When Obama was running for president, he said, "Change." Now, neither one of them really defined what they were talking about, especially Obama. Change what? Just change. So it was ambiguous. But people flocked toward that because they could make it anything they wanted it to be. So you have to understand the perspective they're talking about in ambiguity here. And ambiguity in a personal relationship is what they're talking about. Individualism. U.S. is extremely high and Japan is low. And, you know, in the U.S., it's like, you know, we fight for ourselves. We're individualistic. In Japan, the culture is more what's best for the community, what's best for the family, what's best for the community, what's best for Japan, not what's best for me. In communication, the United States uses low context in their communication. What we say is explicit. The book talked about a lawyer wanting to write a brief where nothing is left to the imagination. You have to say everything. Whereas in Japan and many other collectivist countries, it's high context, indirect communication. They know what they are saying and they understand when somebody tells them something. For example, mañana. When I was in Peru, somebody would say mañana, okay, tomorrow. I was thinking like, 10 a.m. tomorrow. And they were thinking like, yeah, tomorrow. So high context often has stuff built into it that we don't recognize unless we grow up in that culture. Chapter 34, Communication Accommodation Theory, or CAT. You ever change your communication style to fit in? I mean, think about television anchors or DJs. Many of them will lose their accent from the region they're in, so they will be more accepted by the greater TV audience. I don't know if you've ever seen a show called Good Eats, but Alton Brown grew up in Georgia, but he lost his Georgia accent so he would be more accepted by the broader TV community. I will pick up the accent wherever I'm at. And I want to pronounce words like they do. I want to be understood by the local community. I want to speak the way they speak. And it's not a conscious thing I do, it's just what I do. I grew up in Georgia. My mama is from Alabama. When I was in Germany, if my wife was gone and when she came home, if I'd been talking to my mom on the phone, she immediately knew. Because when I talked to mom on the phone, I picked up that southern drawl and I sounded just like I ain't never left Georgia before. Now, I don't talk like that normally, but when I talked to my mom, it kicked in and I had that same comfortable southern drawl that mama had. And then it wouldn't shut off as soon as I got off the phone. It'd take me a little while to get out of that. So if my wife came in and I was talking like that, then she knew exactly what I'd been doing. You were on the phone with your mom. So what is accommodation? Accommodation is an adjustment to communication to decrease social distance. Now, I've realized all my life that I've done this, or for extended portion of my time, but I did not know until I took a theories class and we talked about it, why I was doing it. Because I want to fit in. I want people to accept me. And that's something most of us want to do. Non-accommodation is communication behavior that maintains or increases social distance. I found that I do this as well. I don't pick up a lot of the slang, especially from younger generations, because number one, I probably don't know what the hell it means. But I like to articulate my words. Now, my daughter will say library. It drives me up the wall. Jewelry. No, it's not jewelry, it's jewelry. And I don't know if that my non-accommodation is meant as a way to imply that I'm better than somebody, but I don't want to be seen in that light, shall we say. I want to articulate words and have a distinct voice. And so I don't accommodate. So I'm non-accommodation to when, like, if my family's here, and my daughter's not the only one who does it. I've got 6 grandkids and 2 sons and some daughter-in-laws and son-in-laws, and I'll correct them. Library, you know, because I want them to articulate their words. I don't want them to sound uneducated. And so, that may be why I do that, but it's not because I think I'm better than. Social distance, how similar or different are we from another person? When I was a PhD student, most of my peers were very close to your age. I, on the other hand, was pushing 50. And so I would walk into class with a suit on because to me, that's the way I was supposed to dress. Now, many of my peers would dress just like y'all do. Flip-flops, shorts, tank top, baseball hat on backwards guys, and that type of stuff. And they would want to fit in with their students. And had I walked into class with shorts, tank top, flip-flops, and hat on backwards, they'd have probably said, what the hell is this old man doing? So it wasn't a gap that could be bridged in the first place, but they wanted to decrease that social distance. And that was more of their culture anyway. Convergence, adapting communication behavior to seem more like another. When we are trying to accommodate, we converge. Divergence is strategy to accentuate the differences. And that's I'm setting these boundaries up. This is who I am. This is how I'm going to talk. That's what divergence is. Counter accommodation is the direct and intentional way of maximizing social distance. And I don't want to be your friend, and I don't want to be your buddy. I don't want to be seen as one of your peers. So I am going to be counter accommodational in most aspects because I don't want to blur the lines of social distance. Self handicapping, and they use the example of an older person in the textbook. Self handicapping in this particular case is an older person invoking age for a reason for not doing well. Well, I'm old, I can't walk that fast. Or what? Huh? Didn't hear you. I don't have my hearing aids in. Well, I just can't. My eyes aren't as good as they used to be, and I just can't read that. When my grandkids grab their phone and say, "Hey, look," and they're gonna show me something. Uh, and I'm honest with it. It's like if I can't see it, I can't see it. But self handicapping is just using it as an excuse, whether you want to or not. I just can't do that. Initial orientation. Where are you going to stand? Are you going to stand on your individual identity? I'm Vern. I'm an older guy. I'm legally blind. Or am I going to stand on the group identity? I'm an old soldier. If I identify with any group, it's being a veteran. In many cases, my initial orientation is I want to put the veteran identity out there because I'm trying to do something for veterans. I'm not trying to do something for Vern. So where are you going to orient yourself from? As a veteran, I'll use a lot of military slang and talk like that. As a professor, I try to avoid slang. So where are you going to start your presentation from? And norms are social expectations. That kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. If me, Vern, the old guy, walked into class and had shorts, flip flops, and a baseball hat and a tank top on, like it just come from the beach, most of you going, huh? You know, that's not what our social expectations or our norms are. When I was in a change of command, I had a very articulate commander, and he sounded professional, and he was getting replaced by somebody I'd never met. And at the change of command, the man was giving a speech, and I thought, "Oh my God, he's from the hills of West Virginia, and his family ain't got a fork. His family tree ain't got a fork in it." I got to know him, found out he had two masters and a PhD, and he was very intelligent. It's just he didn't talk like it. But when I was there, it's like, okay, my social expectations would have this articulate, strong leader to follow, and that's not what the first thing I heard. So, what are your social expectations? The recipient's subjective evaluation is what matters. I can try all day long to sound like and fit in with y'all. I can try to sound like I'm 20 years old again. I can try to sound that I know what you're talking about. I can learn that lexicon and I can start talking it. But you, as the recipients, are going to make a judgment, and it's your judgment that matters. Is he condescending to me by trying to talk like me, or is he just stupid? Is he condescending because he's talking above me? Uh, Oftentimes you hear, especially with somebody old, somebody younger, doing baby speak to them. You don't baby speak to me, talk to me. So the recipient's subjective evaluation is what matters. It doesn't matter what this is what I want to do if that's not the way it's taken. Attribution is trying to figure out why someone does things. Why does Vern speak in a haughty-taughty voice? Why does Vern wear a suit? Why does Vern try to fit in with the crowd? And the communication accommodation theory, they also used it to view video of contacts between policemen and people they pulled over, or police officers and people they pulled over. And they found that because if it was conflicting racial people, either a white driver and a black cop, or a black driver and a white cop, and that's the examples they use in the book, or a person of color and white and a person of color and white, it was more confrontational. The driver guard went up and the police officer's guard went up. If they were both people of color, or if they were both white, or Caucasian, I guess I should say, then they didn't have as many problems or conflicts because they were talking basically in the same realm. Now, what I would have liked to have seen is that study, the results. I'd like to have seen it if it was a female driver and a male officer, or a male driver and a female officer, if they had the same conflicts that were pointed out in the study. I don't know if that would ever happen or not. Both my sons are police officers, so I'm really interested in that type of stuff. I hope chapters 33 and 34 went well. Video is going to be up. Make sure that you do the discussions and comment on your peers. And I will see y'all in another week. Y'all take care.